we are with another Cardinals Nest. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dean Beckman, the faculty athletics representative. My co-host is Donny Nadeau, our sports information director. We are coming to you from the Jerry and Pat Pappenfuss Multimedia Lab in Aquinas Hall on the campus of St. Mary's University. Our producer is A.J. Ruskowski. Donny, I want to get him in there first. We usually bring him in at the end, but I think AJ deserves a shout out.
That's because he saves the day every time. So yeah, it's good to get him up there in the beginning rather than the end, because he may have some work to do by the time we get done.
Exactly. A little bit later on in the show, he's got a lot of work today because Nick Rizzo is our guest, and Nick is the women's soccer coach here at St. Mary's. We'll bring him on, and he can tell us about the start to their season. But before we get to that, we'll cover this past week in St. Mary's athletics. And Donnie, over the weekend, we had family weekend. There were all kinds of people on campus for that. It was great to see the families getting back together, for a lot of them the first time since their son or daughter went off to college.
Yeah, but Dean, it's only been a month.
I know, as you've been there, I've been there, it gets emotional. You miss them, right? So it was good to see them back. And as part of that, we had softball and baseball intra-squad games. So how did those go?
Well, they went really well, except for Ben Coons on the baseball team. I had a little conversation with him today because we have their headshots on Tuesday.
Okay.
And Ben has a big giant Band-Aid over. He broke his nose in like the second to last inning of the game that they had on Saturday, and so he's not looking so good right now. But I know Coach Winicky and Coach Cheetah are both very happy with the way fall ball went. It's very important for them. We talk about it all the time, and we can talk about it with Coach Rizzo because they get some time in the springtime. But this is a very important time for baseball and softball, just to kind of, I guess you could call it tryouts if you want, but it's really to kind of get a feel for each other, get a feel for who's on your team and what the coaches expect from you, and get a lot of fundamentals in. And I know that both Coach Winicky and Coach Cheetah are such teachers of the game that it's very important that they take this time and the newcomers really soak up what they're preaching and what they're teaching, and kind of get them ready for the springtime, and which will kick off with their trips to Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there were all kinds of people watching the games, and baseball, they do it in like a World Series format, and I heard the team who won the World Series actually lost the game at the end, kind of the championship game, but it's about points, and they eked it out in points.
And it's important, because like I said, there's a lot of teaching that goes on, but it's also important that they get to play.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about playing the game, and I know Nick sets it up to where they're playing games every week, and it culminates with a quote unquote World Series on the last day, and I know the guys enjoy that. You don't want to just constantly practice. You've got to be able to play.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way for Nick to evaluate talent is to be able to see what they can do in a game situation. You can stand in a batting cage, and I could probably hit pretty well too when they're just kind of going like this.
Sure.
So it's good to get some live pitching and see what these guys can do.
Absolutely. Well, let's turn our attention now to the fall sports, and we'll start with volleyball. Donnie, we're almost halfway through the volleyball season, and we are an even Stevens 7-7 on the season as they just wrap up another weekend tournament.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that you mentioned we're already halfway through the season, and it feels like really we just got going. Right. And I think that's one of the hard parts about fall sports, and I can't wait to have Coach Rizzo on to talk about. It's really quick. I mean, they start in mid-August, and by the end of October you're done. Yeah. And so it's a quick season, and you've got to be prepared every single weekend. This was their last tournament of the season, and they went 2-1 at the Ripon Red Hawk Invitational, beating Ripon and Maranatha Baptist, and then dropping a 3-1 decision to Lakeland in between those two. But I know Coach Zitzo is feeling good about where they're at. As she said when she was on, it's a learning curve, and there's things that they're still adjusting to. They'll get into conference play here this week, and that's when it really matters. So hopefully, they've only had one conference game. They're 7-7. 13 of those 14 have been non-conference. So you get into the heart of their schedule right now, and it's going to be all conference, and that's really when it matters.
And what some of the freshmen are doing is truly phenomenal. I mean, in a lot of the matches, they're sort of on the leaderboard in different categories.
Yeah, absolutely. Abby Stiegler's having an outstanding freshman year, and to take that to the complete opposite, I want to talk a little bit about Mandy Schmidt, one of the senior setters. Her and Larkin have been really doing a phenomenal job. But Mandy on the 10th of September became the 12th player in program history to get 1,000 assists. So a great accomplishment for her. And it's one of those where I'm sure that I probably embarrassed her by bringing that up. But that's pretty impressive when you think about, we've had volleyball since the mid '70s, and she's only the 12th person to get to 1,000, which is really special. And if she keeps it up, she could easily break the top 10 before the season's over. So congrats to her. And if you don't say Kira McNally's name in one of these Cardinals Nest, then there's a problem. And she's just continues to do what she does. And like we talked last week with Abby kind of stepping up, I think it really takes a little bit of that pressure off of Kira and allows her to just do what she does.
Well, and with Mandy, first of all, I'm sure you did embarrass her, knowing her a little bit as I do. But the other thing is, she does it, those 1,000 kills or 1,000 digs very quietly, right? She just never, usually not the one we're talking about week in and week out, but just consistently does her job match in and match out.
Yeah, she's an assist machine and really is somebody that, her and Larkin both are going to be very tough to replace. I mean, whoever steps into that role next year is going to have their hands full, because those two have really done a phenomenal job. And as we've talked, every time we talk volleyball, they kind of run the show, and they determine who gets the ball, and so everything that happens offensively kind of runs around them, and both of them have done a really phenomenal job this year.
Yeah. So we turn our attention now to men's soccer. If we had to give this past week a theme, Donnie, I think it would be ranked week. Because they are facing ranked team after ranked team. They've got Gustavus today. They had Eau Claire yesterday.
Yeah, if you look at what they're doing right now, and I blame Coach Bowers. He put Eau Claire in there. But they on Saturday they played UW Eau Claire, and probably I think was one of their best performances of the year. It was a really, really exciting game. We talked Parents Weekend. You couldn't have picked a better game to watch on the men's side than Eau Claire. They came in unbeaten at 11-0. And they eked out a 2-1 win over us. But I think that Coach Bowers had to feel good about what they were about the way they were playing. And as you just mentioned, it doesn't get any easier on Wednesday because they play Gustavus, which ironically Eau Claire isn't ranked, and I couldn't figure that out. They finally got into the rankings this yesterday. They're 24th, but when we played them, they were unranked at 11-0. Now we've got Gustavus on Wednesday. They're 6-0-2, and they're ranked number 7 in the country. So maybe the pollsters know something that I don't, but 11-0 should be probably higher than 24th. But Gustavus predominantly has been a phenomenal program year in and year out, and this year is no difference. And I firmly, and it's not Donnie the happy-go-lucky glass half full, but I think if they play the way they did against Eau Claire, they have a phenomenal chance of knocking off the Gusties. They get to play it at home. They always play well at home. And so I expect a really good game on Wednesday night.
As we've talked, goal scoring has been one of the problems this year for the men's team, and they're still doing fine. They're 3-4-2 overall, so they're right there as they head in kind of the heart of the conference season coming up now. But the quality of the opponents certainly has had something to do with that too. They had St. John's not that long ago.
Yeah,
so.
No question. And the reality is, no matter who you play, we've got to score more goals. I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything that Coach Bowers wouldn't agree with, but we've got to score more than one goal. And in our last 4 games, we've had one goal, and that was by Serum Balaslamovic. I think I got that right. I hope I did, Churro. But
we'll call him Churro for the purposes of the show.
He scored against Eau Claire, and that was his 3rd goal of the year. But Jack Hurley's got 3 goals, so those two are doing a nice job. But we've just got to get more offensive output. It's another thing we can talk to Coach Rizzo about. It's like you've got to score. I mean, we've got outstanding goaltenders in Daniel Sessler on the men's side and Alexis Wynn on the women's side, but we've got to give them some help. If they've got to get shutouts every time to get a win, that puts a lot of pressure on them, and it's one of those things that you've just got to give them a little bit of breathing room, because if it's a 0-0 game and they can't afford to make a mistake, that makes it tough for them. So they certainly they need to bring up the offensive punch a little bit, and I don't have an answer for that other than putting the ball in the net. But that's reality, and that's where they've got to get a little bit stronger in, and that's offensively.
Well, cross country was off this past weekend, the one off week that they've kind of had this year. So as we pull up this upcoming week's schedule, we'll see that cross country is back in action. And Donnie, you can walk us through
Yeah,
some
they've
of the
got cross country,
events.
as you mentioned. We talked a lot about Gustavus already. The women beating Gustavus Tuesday night 1-0. What a phenomenal game that was. And then you've got the men playing Gustavus on Wednesday night. Then this weekend, Friday is actually a very busy day in that the cross-country team is at the Blue Gold Invitational. Our men's tennis team, they take part in the ITA Midwest Regionals, which our women's team did last weekend. And then we've got volleyball. They've got St. Scholastica on Friday night up in Duluth. And then they come home, finally get to have a home match on Saturday against St. Catherine, while tennis continues with the ITA tournament. And then both soccers get the wonderful trip to Moorhead, Minnesota, and to take on the Cobbers. And that's, I'm sure that's a trip that nobody likes to take, but you know what? We have to do it. It's one of those things that next year they'll come to us, so you got to do it every other year. And I know Coach Rizzo just likes to watch movies on the bus, so it's not that big of a deal for him. But a 7-hour bus ride can be quite long.
It can, and that's how we'll welcome in Coach Nick Rizzo from the women's soccer team. Coach, thanks for joining us. So that's a good first question. What would be your favorite movie pick for a long bus ride?
Oh man, I'm old school. Like the Lord of the Rings movies are like my favorites. So right now they got a new TV show that they're streaming.
Yeah.
So
the prequel.
The Rings of Power thing.
Yeah.
So I'd probably do that, or maybe the new Game of Thrones one.
Okay.
I'm more of a streaming person right now. If there's a good movie out, I'll do it. But I'm definitely a TV series.
Are you a binge guy? Do you have to watch it as you sit down, or are you one that can just kind of take it by a week?
Can't wait. Very impatient. I think it's one of those things. Like I said, there was a meme my wife sent to me one time. It was like someone asked a question, hey, want to watch a 10-hour movie? And it's like, no, that sounds insane. It'd be like, what if I break it down into 10 one-hour episodes and you watch it all at the same time? I was like, yes, I will totally do that.
That's a great way.
That's what we do now, right?
So,
Before we talk soccer, and we do have a lot to talk about, your life changed.
Yes.
And talk a little bit about what it's like to be a father and how it impacts what you do as a coach.
Yeah, I think what's funny, when you mentioned the long bus ride and watch a movie, I was like, that's my time to sleep now. And it's funny as a parent, everyone tells you you don't sleep a lot, and you don't really you believe them, but you don't. You're like, I'm gonna be fine. It's gonna be that, and you wake up the next day and you're like, oh my gosh, I got maybe 4 hours sleep, and you just learn how to operate on less sleep. So I think that has been the biggest transition coming into season, because never before, and hopefully this isn't gonna get me in trouble, but there's times sometimes in the second half of the day before our practice starts, we normally get in around 9:30 and we don't practice till 6 o'clock. I find 30 minutes to go in my office, shut off the lights, and get a half-hour nap. But I think the coolest part has been, and I posted something this on social media the other day, is it is amazing having your kids grow up with your players. It is the coolest experience that our players, every time they see Will, are so excited, want to hold him, and it's just and we try to recruit the right kids, so he's going to grow up with a bunch of great role models too, and so it's super cool to see how they interact with him, and just getting to bring him to practice, and after games I'm holding him and they want to come up and hold him, and so that's, I think, is the absolute coolest part. There's some parts that are tough, with the lack of sleep, but having him grow up with a team that we love so much is amazing.
When I meet with alumni, they never ask how I'm doing. They say, how are your kids? Because I remember them when they were,
And I was going to say the same thing, having been here so long. I mean, I've seen, I look at Tony Winter, our office manager, her 2 kids. Brad's going to be a senior at Augsburg. I mean, I remember when he was born. And you're 100% right, and it is cool to see them grow up and to watch them, progress in their, when Will gets older and he starts playing soccer and you get to see those things. It is really a neat experience, and something that I think is very special about St. Mary's, in that you have the ability to, hey, I can bring Will in and the players can be with them, and that is important.
No. They babysat him for the golf outing the other week. So, literally they had him for, 2 of our players had him in the dorm room for 7 hours the other week, and he survived. So they're good babysitters too.
So, well, Nick, let's get to this year's soccer team. You're off to a 3-4-1 start. Give us a little synopsis or summary of how it's gone so far.
It's been a very interesting year. After last season, obviously, where we had a lot of success, I think it was one of those things where we made a very conscious decision as a staff we need to beef up our schedule. Our non-conference schedule last year, we went 6-1, and it wasn't a very challenging schedule. And so for us going into this year, we wanted to pick up some better teams to really challenge us. And we picked up Wartburg, who right now is number 6 in the country. We picked up Luther, who's traditionally in the regional rankings and is a good team again this year. We picked up Stevens Point, who was in the NCAA tournament in 2019. And so we made a very conscious decision that we were going to play a tougher schedule. And going into the season with the team that we had, we were like, we're ready, and this is what we're going to do. And like everything, like the best laid plans of mice and men always seem to go astray. And coming into season, we had 3 ACL tears to seniors, 3 of whom are, I would say, 2 of them that started almost every single game last year, and Michaela, who had started about half the games last year and was probably going to start almost every single one this year. And so when Soph went down with her ACL against Carleton 30 minutes in the first game, it started kind of this stretch of games where it's like, we need to figure this out, and it wasn't a forgiving stretch of games where we played Carleton, who's number 1 in the conference right now, played Benz, who's number 2 in the conference right now, played Luther, who is a top team in the IAC, and then played St. Kate's, who won the league last year, and then played Gustavus, who was 4th in the league last year. And so it wasn't a forgiving stretch of games to have to learn and have all these new players have to step up. And so we had some bumps, but there's this great quote that it's from a TV show I like called Ted Lasso. And he talks about how the fairy tale never starts or ends in the dark forest. The dark forest always seems to come smack dab right in the middle of the story. And that was a little bit of our dark forest moment, and we had to stick together and learn together and get out of it. And I think we started to get out of it a little bit, which has been nice.
I think you started to leave that forest against St. Kate's.
Yes.
I mean, the last 2 games that you guys have played, I think it shows what a tougher non-conference schedule can do for you because, like you said, St. Kate's won the league. They won the tournament last year. You tied them 1-1, a great game. Yep. And then you turn around and you come through with a key goal late in the game on Tuesday against Gustavus, and you win 1-0. I think I'd like you to talk just a little bit about the St. Kate's game, in that when we were done, you and I talked, and you had said that there are ties that sometimes feel like losses, and there are other times when a tie feels like a win. That to you felt like a win. One, you got a point, which is huge, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, going into that game, we had not gotten all of our players back yet, so including the 3 ACLs, we had Dakota, who is very limited coming back from a concussion, who's a key midfielder for us, only a sophomore, but started every game last year, started every game up into her concussion this year, and is really just a rock in the middle for us. And one of our other players, Lauren Ash, who's a freshman who's been phenomenal this year, started all but the game against Kate's because she was not available because of family commitment. We went into that game and we started 3 freshmen at center mid, none of whom were actual center mids. One of Kaylin Klassen, who stepped up, is a right back. Mallory Williams, who has been great, got the goal that game, is a right back. And then Lauren Scrippo, who's typically a forward, had to play attacking mid for us. And so I just told him before the game, I go, you just need to give us your very best effort, and no matter what happens, we'll be proud of you. And they gave us a phenomenal effort. We had a ton of people step up big. And it was just one of those things where it's kind of been the theme of our season with all the bumps that have come in the road. We've needed more and more people that are very young to step up, and we've had a lot of very young players step up. And so getting out of that game with a 1-1 tie with everything that happened going into it, I think just felt really good with everything that had happened the 2 previous weeks.
Yeah. One thing Donnie and I have talked about, despite the really tough schedule, even the losses that you've had, all of them are 1-2 goal games, right? And so you're right there. The competition or the effort is definitely there. And of course, Alexis Wynn in goal kind of keeps you in every game, right?
That doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt.
No, and it's been great. And Lex knows this, so I don't feel bad saying this. Lex against St. Ben's had maybe Lex's worst game that I've coached her, and it was one of those things where you can approach that and go down, and you see it with goalkeepers. It's like forwards. If you don't score, it can be a very negative spiral. But I'm going to give my assistant Marissa a ton of credit. She works with our keepers. I really don't. And made it a very practical approach. It's not an emotional thing why these goals went in. It was our positioning. It was our timing. It was where we were when the ball was at different points of the field. Marissa worked with Lex on film the entire week. Lex's game against St. Kate's was maybe the best game she's ever played in a Cardinal uniform, and followed it up with maybe just as good of a performance against Gustavus. And that's what you need out of your captains and key players is you can have bad games. We're human beings, but you have to bounce back. And Lex could not have bounced back in a better way.
Well, we talked before you came on about the importance of a good goalkeeper and how they do keep you in games. Like you mentioned, I mean, she had 12 saves against St. Kate's, and that's, I mean, for a goalkeeper, that's astronomical number.
Yeah.
And then she had 8 saves against Gustavus, but there were 2 in the second half that, honestly, you guys probably should have lost 2-1.
Yeah.
Because both of them should have went in, and she made it was incredible what she did, and that's what a good goalkeeper can do for you, is you can steal wins, and that's really, I think, what she did against Gustavus.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing about it is, like, she's making, like, those great saves, but she's doing it because she's doing the right stuff. Lex is not a 5'10", 6-foot goalkeeper. She's covering the same goal that Sess has to cover with giving up probably 8 inches. And so the thing about when you're doing with that, she's making those saves, but she's doing it just by doing the right simple stuff. She's in the right spots. She's timing herself well. Even against Kate's, I joked with Riss after the game. Lex made some big saves, but she didn't have to stretch on any of them because she was in all the right positions. And by doing all that right stuff, the little stuff right, she has gone from a really good goalkeeper to an excellent goalkeeper in the last week or two.
As I look at your roster, freshmen, how many freshmen did you bring in this year, and talk about that a little
16. We knew going into this year, and anyone that sees the disparity on our lineup, that's where there was obviously, between me and the previous coach, there was another coach that came in, and so we don't currently have any juniors. And so for us, we have, of healthy people, we have 7 healthy seniors, 7 healthy sophomores, and 16 healthy freshmen. So 15 healthy freshmen. So our healthy freshmen actually outnumber the rest of our classes. And we knew that going in. Again, it wasn't no secret to us that we don't have anyone in the junior class. No one quit or anything. It was just that's what our junior class currently has. And so we knew this class had to be big and it had to be important. And fortunately for us, I think we've started 7 freshmen this year already, and not every single game. And they've stepped up very big for us. I think, it's hard to even point one of them out because they've all had their moment that they've done very, very well with.
And as we were talking earlier, there are some who aren't playing that much that probably deserve to, but you only got so many spots.
Yes. It's the cruelest thing about being a young player sometimes, and I think one of my favorite examples of this was, anyone that follows college basketball, Coach K was one time asked about 2 of his players, and one of them was Shane Battier, and I believe the other one was Elton Brand. And Elton Brand came out of high school, was projected All-American. I think he was an All-American his junior year. Shane Battier came out of high school, was not as high, eventually ended up being Player of the Year in the NCAA his senior year. Their journeys ended up in the same spot. They just looked very different. And that's what we try to tell our freshmen all the time is, like, there are freshmen that are going to start. There are freshmen that might not start and still end up all conference their senior year along with that one that started, but your journey just might have a different tail. I don't want to look ahead, but I'm already thinking 16 senior salutes, so I'm already thinking ahead. But does it put a burden on you in 3 years or in 4 years when they're seniors? Now you've got to replace 16 people. Is there a strategy to maybe say, hey, we're going to add maybe a couple more to next year's class and a couple more to the next class so that you're not replacing 16 in that 1 year? Yeah, no, and fortunately I've been through it before where I've had big classes, and I think the number one thing is just like not having attrition, and so like as long as we're not losing these players, it's really funny. The last class I had from Monmouth, my previous school, we started with 14 and they graduated 13 even with me leaving the school, and they just had to replace that class this year. But it's one of those things, I think if we average around 8 a year, even if we have to replace that one group, it'll be fine. The number one goal is when we recruit, we need about, I would say 3 or 4 starters in each class and some good contributing people in each class. But the number one thing is to get 4 players that you're like, these are almost lockdown starters even as freshmen every single year. And you might get that, you might not, but that's the goal with every single recruiting class. So as long as we're talking about the roster, and I was going to save this question, but I'm going to ask it now because it fits the roster. Do you ever have trouble distinguishing some of your players since you do have 2 sets of twins on your team? Do they look any different to you? Because I'm a month in, and thank goodness, and here's the only saving grace with both sets. The 2 field players, Melanie and Kristen Ledoux, Melanie braids her hair, Kristen does not. So, like, I will be yelling at them across the field. I'll be like, turn your head, and they'll turn, and I can see, like, the ponytail. And that's how I can distinguish. So here's a secret to you 2. Change it up. So I got those. And then fortunately Sam and Kenzie play different positions, so we practice in different, like our keepers have different practice jerseys. But it's funny, our players were so messed up. I was like, the one's the keeper, how do you mess this up?
Right.
But yeah, no, I mean, both sets, if I saw them in street clothes, still not there yet. I'm getting there.
Like, I just think it's crazy that you have two. I mean, one set of twins, I know Coach Egan for the men's hockey team has a set of twins, but two is just, and they're in the same class. That's just crazy.
It's ridiculous. The best part is they're all four of them are the nicest, hardest working kids, and so like even their like demeanor you can't distinguish from each other because they all work hard, they all are nice, and so it's just like you guys are all the same. Like it's crazy. They're great kids.
Donnie, we have the luxury on this show getting to know all our coaches very well. I want to have a show where we've got Nick and Nick. Nick Rizzo, Nick Winicki.
Well, we wouldn't have to talk. I'll tell you that right now.
The stories, the quotes, I mean, you guys are great. I mean, I just love it.
I think it's interesting that this is your third year, and you said this is the first time you've been live on our show.
Yes.
So this is a first, which is, you know, as we get farther and farther away from the COVID crisis, you kind of put it in the back a little bit, and kind of nice to be back to normal and have you guys in studio.
I didn't realize we've never had you in.
Yeah, I didn't.
No, I've been on Zoom twice. I think. I don't think I've ever been.
I think, and the part two was this is your second time as a member of our staff.
Yep.
So I just feel like you've been here forever.
Right,
you know. So but it's hard to believe that it's only been year 3. And the thing I wanted to ask you, and I didn't get to earlier when you talked about your schedule and beefing it up. The rarity to your schedule this year, and I want to know if this was planned, is you still have 3 non-conference games left.
Yes.
Which is very odd at this time of the year, because usually it's now you go conference and let's rock and roll, and yet you've got 3, including 2 in a row.
Yep.
Was that on purpose to maybe kind of give yourself a break from the conference?
It's always an interesting dynamic trying to schedule, because with our conference having so many teams, we start our non-conference play insanely early. Like, we start our non-conference play about 2.5 weeks in. So, like, when we played Carleton, we had played 3 games, they'd played 4. And so, like, you don't even really know yourself then. And so, to be brutal honest, if anyone in the conference here, like, if you could start our conference games, like, maybe, like, a week later and make it easier to schedule non-conference games, and also give us a little bit more time to learn about ourselves before going into conference play. But, yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of just when games fit in, and again, ideally, we would like to go in 2 years. We're actually we just scheduled it yesterday, but we're going to go out to Oregon and play 2 teams out there, and because we have a lot of players from the Pacific Northwest really early. So yeah, it's fun, and to try to figure out like all the different ways to do it, because then it's like you play tougher teams, your record might be a little worse, but you've been tested a little bit more, and so like are your players like, because right now I joke with our players like we're 3-4-1. If we were to play the exact same schedule as last year, we'd be 4-2-1 right now,
sure.
or 5-2-1 right now.
No
It's just,
question.
and it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we might feel a little better, but I think those games against Wartburg and against Luther really tested us and made us better. So when we played Gustavus yesterday, we were ready to go.
I kind of felt yesterday that there wasn't a panic. And I think that does have to do with those earlier games, and that, okay, it's 0-0, we're pushing, and you know, there was just kind of a calm that, you know, okay, we'll get it taken care of. And I think that you're right, being so young, I think getting those tougher games early must give them some confidence heading in, even though you didn't necessarily win all of those games.
Yeah, no, and again, I think it's very important to be battle tested. I think when you get to, you do not want your conference teams to be the toughest teams you play all year. And sometimes, again, if you're on the men's side and Gustavus is number 6 in the country, it's hard to figure out who the top 5 teams are to get them on the schedule. But like with Wartburg and even with Luther, like Luther beat St. Kate's earlier this year, and obviously is a very good squad. And so with those teams, like, we didn't want to get to our conference games like we did last year and those be the toughest games we play all year. We need our players to see a level of play that's going to challenge them before that. And I think especially with all the freshmen that needed to play this year, with all the injuries and everything, I keep saying, like, obviously I think it's going to benefit us in the dog days of October, like when it gets later in the season and we need to grind out results. But those guys, especially over the next 3 seasons, like, we'll have multiple kids that might be 4-year starters, which is crazy.
All right, well, I got to hold us to the time limit here. Nick Rizzo, thanks for joining us today. That's going to do it for the Cardinals Nest. We'll be back again next week with another one. Thanks for watching.